The Image 7. This was the collective name given to a rebellious group of comic book superstars that, in the early 90s, spearheaded a revolution that would change the comic industry forever. In the early 90s, comic books were enjoying one of the industry's biggest financial boom periods of all time, with record-breaking sales leading not only to an increase in comic book stores across North America, but also a healthy and well-publicized speculator market made up of collectors believing that many of the issues they bought during this time might become highly sought-after and valuable collector's items later. While it was perhaps not surprising the world of comic books would continue to gain in popularity following the emergence of more critically acclaimed, mature storytelling in the mid-80s, with classics like Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns effectively changing the industry overnight, there was no doubt that the increasing wave of interest in the early 90s was largely driven by a new breed of artists, who were delivering unique, dynamic, and hyper-stylized art styles that readers soon couldn't get enough of. While writers remained an important, nay, crucial part of the comic puzzle, it's undeniable that artists were the star attraction of this boom period. A fact that did not go unnoticed by one of those young new superstar artists, Todd McFarlane. McFarlane had started to gain attention as an artist during brief runs on DC's Detective Comics and Marvel's Incredible Hulk, before shooting to the top of the industry during an incredibly popular tenure as the primary artist on Amazing Spider-Man. But it was during that run that McFarlane started to feel dissatisfied with the common, entrenched business practices of the industry, which saw the artists at Marvel and DC often treated as little more than hired guns, unable to get what McFarlane thought would have been a fair increase in compensation as their artwork was used on various pieces of merchandise, and, of course, as their art began to become the main selling point during a new gigantic raise in sales. Marvel, sensing McFarlane's frustrations, tried to placate him by giving him his own brand new Spider-Man monthly title to both draw and write. And while the early sales numbers were excellent, a series of disagreements with Marvel editors, and McFarlane's own difficulty meeting deadlines, only exacerbated the issues between the artist and the publisher. McFarlane reached out to other popular Marvel artists of the time and found he was not alone in his discontent. And in late 1991, McFarlane and the other 6 members of the group destined to become known as the Image 7, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, Mark Silvestri, Eric Larson, Jim Valentino, and Whilce Portacio, informed both Marvel and DC they would no longer work for them, and would instead be starting their own new company, Image Comics, which was meant to compete with Marvel and DC in the superhero comic book business, but with a crucial difference. Creators working for Image would retain all rights, intellectual property, and ownership of the characters they created and published through the company. The move sent shockwaves through the industry. When Image started, with a series of new superhero titles from the Image 7, it was an immediate success, and soon Image surpassed DC as the second most popular company in the industry, with sales figures that also had Marvel looking over their shoulder. But while the early days of Image were a definite triumph, it wasn't long before cracks in the armor appeared. The Image 7 may have been great artists, but they hadn't put a lot of thought into the formalities of actually running a company. Soon, a reputation for severely late titles, missed deadlines, poorly written books that championed style over substance, and public, ego-driven infighting between the 7 founders started to tarnish the company's reputation, and the eventual collapse of the collector market the comic industry had enjoyed in the early 90s didn't help matters either. When Rob Liefeld was eventually unanimously voted out of the company by the other 6 founders, and after Jim Lee sold his art studio and Image characters to DC, it seemed like the company's days as an industry influencer might be behind it. But, amazingly, in the years to come, Image would successfully reinvent itself, dropping the Marvel and DC-esque approach of a shared superhero universe for a new approach, which it maintains to this day, that simply allows any creator with a great idea for a standalone story to publish their creator-owned book through Image. A move that led to new levels of success for the company, with titles like Invincible, Paper Girls, Saga, and The Walking Dead. So, today, Image has definitely found its niche and is now looked at as a positive force for creator rights in the industry. And while those early days of Image presenting itself primarily as a new upstart alternative to DC and Marvel are mostly just a memory, a few of the original titles from that time still exist today, including the one character, a demonic superhero created by the Image Revolution mastermind Todd McFarlane, that for a brief moment in the late 90s seemed poised to genuinely become a mainstream success on the same level as the heroes of DC and Marvel. The year is 1997, and New Line Cinema is ready to launch the next big cinematic superhero franchise, with Spawn. Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris, and I don't know if I have much to say.
That's fine. You know what? That's perfectly fine, because actually, Chris, I want to start with a couple correction corners here.
Oh, go on. Yes, excellent.
I like to when we mess up, I like to get it right out of the way.
Sure.
So I'm going to take the hit on the first one. A couple episodes ago, in our Catwoman episode, in my little intro that I do, I said that the Batman movie featuring Lee Merriweather as Catwoman was from '68. That is, of course, the year the show ended. The movie was actually from '66. I know that. That's embarrassing. So please don't revoke my Batman fan card or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second correction I want to make, this applies to both of us, Chris.
Okay.
In our last episode, which was dedicated to David E. Kelley's Wonder Woman pilot, we both said that we were excited for Wonder Woman 84. We, of course, now both know we were wrong about that. We shouldn't have been. So we apologize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were actually dead wrong. It was.
Yeah.
It was.
That's on us. That's on us, and also on Patty Jenkins and everybody involved. But
yes, it's fun too, because even I know our Battleship episode aired after that, and I go on kind of a spiel about internal logic and rules, and I sort of wish that we recorded that after seeing Wonder Woman 84.
Yeah, yeah, but in a way, it's perfect to being reminded of how hard it can be to get these comic book movies right. Mm-hmm. Is maybe a good kind of framing device for this episode.
Sure.
So, because for this one, as you already know by looking at the title and assumedly the intro, the episode description, we are looking at 1997's Spawn. Another 90s comic book movie for us. Yeah. What's your? I want to ask right off the bat before, because we're going to talk about why this movie happened, and we'll talk about a little bit about the history of Spawn and everything. But
yep.
What's your general history with Spawn as like a property, an IP? When this was, I know you were younger than I was when this came out, as you will always be younger than I am. There's never going to be a point where you're not. But but I certainly know how I felt about Spawn at the time. As a little kid when this came out, was it even on your radar, or where were you at?
No, really not at all. The movie came out in 97, so I was 9 or about to turn 9. So this type of like R-rated property or product, I guess the movie was PG-13, but we'll get into that.
Yeah.
But no, it wasn't really on it until after the movie, honestly, because then I became into like junior high, and then I kind of got into more comic books and this and that. I never really read Spawn, but I was a fan of a lot of... I collect a lot of stuff. I don't really collect stuff anymore, to be totally honest, but a lot of like movie collectibles and toy collectibles and statues and shit like that. I haven't for a long time, but I was a fan of the brand that we will talk about, that the creator of Spawn spawned.
Yeah,
so I was aware by that, and like the art style and stuff. I was definitely like a fan of the art, I would say.
That's actually the reason I asked that and why I wanted to start there, because I was just trying to gauge from someone who I knew wasn't probably as deep into comic books as I was around this time.
Sure.
Spawn's an interesting one just because now we look back on it, it's because this was a movie, and because I think a lot of people at least remember it being a movie. It's kind of hard to remember how strange it even seemed that this movie was happening at that time, because every other comic book film you can think of, except for another one I'm going to mention in a little bit, but most of the big comic book movies of the 90s made sense to do. Obviously, you're still getting a couple more Batman movies because of the success of Tim Burton's Batman. And then, then these companies are going and trying to find like other big characters to kind of adapt. And it makes sense to see a Daredevil or a Catwoman movie. But Spawn's an interesting one because Spawn is not a Marvel or DC character. It's from Image Comics, which was at that time was not brand new, but was only a few years into its being. And it's just, this was really like the first maybe very big attempt to turn a third level like superhero into the next big movie franchise, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
This was Image's first big shot at it, and I think ultimately the failure of this film might be the big. I don't know. It's hard to say. I'm no Image Comics historian to the degree I should be to make this claim, but I'm going to make it anyways. I think the failure of this film and the fact that it didn't create a big movie franchise might be what ultimately led Image Comics to kind of going in a different direction overall. But I'll talk about that a little bit later too. But yeah, why don't we give some stats about Spawn?
Yeah, as we said, this movie came out in 1997, directed by Mark A. Z. Dippé, written
Or as
by
Americans would call him, Mark A.Z. Dippy.
yeah. Well, would you even say Dippé? You might say just Dip.
No, Dippy. Dippy. That's what I call him.
Dippy doo. Okay. No disrespect to Mark.
No.
Written by Mark A. Z. Dippé and Alan B. McElroy. The budget of the film was $40 million, and it had a worldwide take of a staggering $55 million. Not good.
I think that's domestic, because I think worldwide
that's Is it? I only saw on Box Office Mojo, it only gave me one number.
See, on Wikipedia it has it as 87.9, and I've seen that number parroted in some other things as well.
Okay, all right. Well, then 87.9. So it did double its budget then.
But only just, right?
Oh yeah, you're right. Okay.
Especially
I thought it was
since
way bigger failure than that.
No, I mean it's definitely a failure. I mean, it's depending what you see, it either breaks even or just passes breaking even. Which, I mean, I'm sure this isn't one that the studio like lost sleep over probably.
Right.
But nobody was rushing to make the next two, which were planned at the time.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
So should we talk a little bit? I know we did with Catwoman before, but should we just kind of talk about comic book movies in the 90s again, just in case? I'm sure not everyone listening to this has listened to every episode, so maybe it's worth just saying where this kind of industry was at the time.
Sure, yeah, definitely. It's actually funny because I when I was watching this film, when the credits started to roll, I started to text some friends what my immediate thoughts of it, right? And then I was like, man, I'm revisiting Spawn after, well, really the first time I ever saw it. And actually a friend of mine brought this up and was saying, first of all, he says, I've been thinking of Spawn a lot lately. And I was like, you and me lead very different lives. But then he said he was just thinking about how 90s comic book films were so much different than they are today, and what he was saying was they're more they focused on a lot more strange and fantastical than this spectacle driven stuff. And me and you have said previous times on here that we've been revisiting a lot of 90s things in general, and I would agree with you. There's a lot more high concept. Like, the 90s was a wild fucking time, man. Like, there was a lot of chances being made. There was strange. It was fantasy. It was world building. It was this whole thing. And they didn't look... Again, there weren't these CGI fiascos as they are now. But... Well, yeah, I guess not in... We'll get to that in this movie. But just in general, it did feel like there was less of a focus on it. Like, me and you have just revisited the Blade franchise. And, Blade 1 is fucking awesome. It's dark and gritty, obviously, but there's something else to it. There's something else that's lost, and I think comic book movies made now. You would agree, obviously.
And that's why I mentioned Catwoman. So Catwoman obviously is 2004, but and that means it comes after that kind of 1-2 punch of X-Men and Spider-Man, which a lot of people look at as like the moment where studios are like, whoa, okay, this is something, right? And then Catwoman is ultimately like indicative. I know this isn't that episode anymore, but that's indicative of a movie where the studio is just like, well, comic book movies are in, so let's just do anything, right? We can just make a comic book movie, shove it in front of your face, and you'll like it. And that's still a mentality that exists today, right? The 90s, they were, I want to say, slightly more selective in what they were deciding to do. Or, like you said, if they were picking something, it's because somebody involved somewhere actually had a passion for it. Or the studio thought, wow, this is high concept enough that there's something about this that'll bring an audience in.
Yeah.
And that's where Spawn kind of makes sense, because at this time in the 90s, so in my intro, I talked about the history of Image Comics, and Spawn really was the big breakout book of that line. And right away, it felt like if anything was going to take off and maybe be the next big thing of Image, it would be Spawn. And in fact, McFarlane kind of went into it with this very, businessman mentality of how can I make Spawn into not just the next comic book success, but a multimedia success.
Yeah.
And he right away starts laying the seeds to where he starts making Spawn toys. And that obviously that grows into a bigger industry with McFarlane toys in general. He makes a deal with HBO for an animated series, which actually debuts just a few months before this movie comes out. And I think to most people, in terms of like multimedia, is still considered, the better, more accurate version. And then he's, as early as 1992, when the book starts, he's, already at work trying to get a movie deal. And as early as 1992, which makes sense because the early issues are huge successes. The first issue, Spawn, sells something like 1.7 million copies, which is, the kind of numbers that are unheard of for comic books today.
Yeah.
Columbia Pictures is like right away, they're showing like an interest in it. But and I think they're not the only studio. I think from what I've heard, they're the ones who kind of got the closest in the early run for it. But the problem they keep butting up against is Todd McFarlane,
Yeah.
who wants a lot of creative control. And finally, it's New Line Cinema who kind of agrees. And I don't know how much hearsay this is, but I've read, I don't know if you have as well, Chris, that he sold the rights to New Line Cinema for $1. And in exchange for him having creative input, and they also let him keep the merchandising rights. So I guess we'll talk about whether that was a good call or not. But interesting. I mean, New Line Cinema as a studio in general is a pretty wild studio. I really like New Line, or especially like this era of them, because they were making a lot of they were pretty much the go-to studio for this kind of like mid-budget level fantasy high concept kind of film, right?
Do you want to talk about Todd McFarlane right now? Because we're kind of
we probably should. We
probably should,
because there's no sense talking about him during the movie necessarily. So.
Yes, and I don't think a lot of people. Well, I mean, maybe you will. I don't know. Who knows? Who knows who listens? It might be just us. But a lot of people don't know who Todd McFarlane is. So let's give a little bit of a history here. Todd McFarlane's actually from my hometown, so to speak. So he's a Canadian. He's from Alberta, and he started with I guess early with Marvel, and he was with Spider-Man, right? And he was drawing for Spider-Man.
He didn't necessarily start with Marvel, but that's definitely where he blew up.
That was like his big break or whatever.
Yeah, he was doing covers and stuff he did some Incredible Hulk work and everything, and then he came on as the cover artist on Amazing Spider-Man, and then they gave him the interior art, and his like run led up to issue 300, which was the issue that introduced Venom.
Right.
So he became like a huge breakout star in the art world in terms of Spider-Man, and I think he's still kind of technically considered a co-creator of Venom.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, it's kind of. I mean, it was always cool for me, like living here, knowing that the creator of Spawn and co-creator of Venom was from here. That was always cool. As I got older and started to listen to Todd McFarlane and hear about more of his business practices, he's a different kind of guy. As Trev alluded to before, he definitely wants to be a businessman, and in the not the greatest definition of a businessman.
Well, for better or worse, he's a calculating guy, right?
Yes.
He went into everything with a plan, and I mean, on one hand, you do have to give it to him because he's an undeniable success, right? Like most everything he wanted to do, he accomplished. But that does come with a certain ruthlessness and willingness to screw over others.
Yeah, he's got quite the ego on him, for sure.
Yes, he's a very divisive figure in the comic book world, and that is not because of his talents as an artist. I think everyone tends to agree. Not everyone, but I mean, I'm sure there's some people that that's not the style for them. But I mean, his artwork is beloved, and I will say, like, as on just a pure art level, I do love McFarlane. I was definitely one of those people who was very. In 92 when this is happening, I'm 11 or 12, and this was really that era, the early 90s, that big blow up of comics at that time, when the artists were really the stars. They were really taking the mantle away from the writers. And that's ultimately where you run into some problems, because as you had all these superstar artists like McFarlane and Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld kind of becoming the ones that the sales are based around, the company started giving them, do you guys want to write too? And that exposes a lot of issues, But this is also, and I'm not going to reiterate everything I already said in the intro, but McFarlane is the one who kind of realizes that, hey, as creators, we're kind of getting dicked over by, Marvel and DC. And to his credit, he was right about that. Like the ultimate impetus behind Image was correct. The fact of saying, we're not being treated right. We're not given, any profits off of our characters. They're taking art we did, putting it on t-shirts and hats and posters. We don't see any profit from it.
Yep.
So he gets a bunch of other people to join him in ditching Marvel and DC and create this other company, Image.
It's funny that you're mentioning how fucked over artists get in this industry. I don't think many people really realize that. And even a friend of mine had sent me an article that somebody, again, a local here, was just hired by Marvel. I think like a few months ago or whatever, and it kind of made news, right? It was like, oh my god, a local artist is hired by Marvel, and like I didn't want to like shit on like the parade, but I was like, like we'll see how that goes, because it's kind of as much as we love these products that are put out there, the artists tend to get royally screwed over. Sorry.
Yeah, I think I see. Here's another thing where you got to give McFarlane credit because, and the other artists who helped him form Image, is ultimately what they did is they brought attention to it.
Right.
And I mean, it's probably still happening today. I'd say it's probably a slightly better marketplace today, just because for two reasons. I think a lot of the artists now who go to work for Marvel or DC, they just know what they're getting into.
Sure.
And there's an element of saying like, okay, I understand this is the kind of deal I'm going into, but these are the characters I love. I still want to draw these characters. I'm still going to get, health insurance, this and everything.
Yeah.
So there isn't if you go into it understanding what it is, it's not as bad, right?
Sure.
I also think there's more opportunity today because of Image and because of what McFarlane and Co. did. There is more opportunity to work for Marvel DC for a little bit, and then kind of, if you really break, go off and then work for Image or something where you do retain your creator-owned characters and rights. So It's a little bit better, even though the industry is hurting and the sales are not the way they used to be. There's more competition for these artists, and so I don't know.
Sure.
Again, I'm not in the industry, so I can't say for sure, but
Right.
But yeah, so when they start Image, like right away, it's a huge success. I mean, so you have like Jim Lee's Wildcats, McFarlane's Spawn, Rob Liefeld's Youngblood. These books all like hit big time. And then this is where you start to see the problems with McFarlane. It doesn't take too long, right? Because he had this awesome idea, right? Let's get these artists together, let's form a company. And it sure sounds like not enough thought was put into, hey, how do you run a company? Well, we'll figure that out later, right? And Image right away is kind of plagued by books being late, deadlines not being met. Spawn is a great example of this. I'm trying to think. I believe Spawn might even be. Don't hold me to this, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. That Spawn was one of the books that actually skipped an issue because like the issue just wasn't ready when it was supposed to be. So
it did.
Like,
I saw that as well. It did.
Okay, yeah. So like,
yep.
I can't remember I'll make up the numbers just because I can't remember. But like as a reader, like issue 18 came out, and then there was no 19, and then 20 came out, and you had to, and then like 21 came out, and then 22, and it's like they finally went back to that issue. And it's like, oh, all right, that's weird. And then to his credit, I guess again, he kind of understood because he created Spawn. He was writing and drawing it. I think he early on started to think, well, maybe I shouldn't be writing it because the writing and drawing it's slowing me down. So he makes this kind of bold decision I'm going to hire a lot of like big time writers to come in, and he, and do issues. So he says, I'll get Neil Gaiman to do an issue. I'll get Frank Miller to do an issue. I'll get Alan Moore to do issues. I'll get Dave Sims to do issues. That is awesome as a reader. There's this book that's got this awesome art by McFarlane, and I have these like superstar writers coming in to add their impetus to it or to add their vision to it. And I don't know if he's just not stopping to think like, okay, but you've made this big deal about Image is creator-owned material. Whatever those writers create for the issue, they own now.
Right.
And there's issues where he starts to treat them like they didn't. And ultimately, the Neil Gaiman thing is a big part of that, where in Neil Gaiman's issue, he introduces like 3 crucial new characters into the Spawn mythology. And later on, McFarlane wants to use those characters in different ways without Gaiman's input. It's like, well, wait, Gaiman created those characters. And that leads to like a big lawsuit between them. There's some other issues in that lawsuit. Do you want to talk about the Tony Twist lawsuit?
So McFarlane was kind of well known for putting real life names in his books or names that were based on real life people. In one of his Spawn issues, there was a gangster villain called Tony Twistelli. So he was the bad guy, right? Well, it came out that name was based off of an NHLer who played for the St. Louis Blues, Tony Twist. So this guy, this hockey player got wind of this and was like, well, fucking no. And actually sued Todd McFarlane in 1997.
I got a great quote from Tony Twist, the real Tony Twist here. Because it says that he found out about it through his mom. Because I guess a bunch of kids came to his house with Tony Twist related items, they said. And so he went and watched the cartoon, because at this point the Spawn cartoon was out and Tony Twist was featured in it. And he says, so I'm watching and I'm in pink thong underwear, smoking a cigar, ordering the kidnap of a child while 2 women are naked on the couch making love to each other. I obviously didn't want any part of that. Even if I was a good guy, I wouldn't have participated. You've got kids being kidnapped. You've got nudity. You've got police raping women. It's nothing I want to be affiliated with.
Yep. Yep. So he sues the shit out of Todd McFarlane for I think 15 mil, right? He started with.
Yeah.
And then the lawsuit was solved or was done in 2004, and he did win $5 million. Out of court, actually, right? Because the lawsuit was dropped or settled. What was it?
Yeah, I think it was a settlement. But this just ultimately shows like what we're getting at is, where there's certain things about McFarlane where he's a very smart businessman, and then there are other things where you're like, what a dope. Because the problem here was just that he came out and said, I named this guy after Tony Twist, but never like talked to Tony Twist about it. If he had just kept his mouth shut, because Tony Twistelli is, I don't know, I think he could have got away with it if he just wouldn't have said, yeah, I based off this hockey player.
Yeah.
So really like shot himself in the foot there, and he's just burned his bridges with a lot of other creators. He's had fallings out with a lot of the initial Image crew. So he's definitely still got, a pretty passionate fan base, I believe. Spawn as a comic is still running today. I think it's like in the 300s issue-wise. I believe it has the record now for the longest running independently published comic.
How much is he involved on the day-to-day on those? Do you know?
So he still writes it, actually. There was a long period where he kind of took a big step away from it, and he was just kind of considered like the overseer of it. But he was no longer drawing it or no longer writing it, and then he eventually came back to write it. But he only draws now. He does occasional covers, I believe, and then he'll do like anniversary issues. But he doesn't draw anymore. I think because I think for him. That's funny to kind of think how he's kind of swapped his mentality, right? Where he's like, oh, it's easier to write now than draw. Yeah. But, I do think that kind of makes sense because now he's not just an artist, he runs an empire. And to be fair, I'm sure he doesn't have the time to sit down and draw with the kind of intricate art style he had, It would probably be kind of shitty or tossed off art if he was just kind of, going at it. Nobody wants that. So he just writes and has other artists work on it.
I also know McFarlane's name because he created the alternate logo for the Edmonton Oilers.
Yep.
So the big gear logo that a lot of people didn't like.
Yeah. So ultimately, I myself have mixed feelings on the guy. It's really hard for me to pin down like how I feel about McFarlane because there's a lot of stuff about him that annoys me, and I find him kind of to be despicable at times.
Yep.
But I can't deny how much I like his art, and I can't, I'm not going to deny how much I was into him as a fan at this time, and how much I did love Spawn at this time. I don't remember being super excited about the movie. Maybe I had kind of fallen out of the comic by the time the movie comes along, by 97. Yeah, maybe. But there was definitely a point where I was really into this character and into this book, and I have a good chunk of the initial run, and in fact I'll talk about this when we talk more about the movie. Last night I went into my long boxes and I pulled out the first 10 issues. I have more than that, but I pulled out those 10 to quickly look through them and kind of refamiliarize myself with the early storylines to see how it all matches up. But let's get back to the movie so that we can talk about it soon and just talk about the background of it a little bit more. So when New Line gets in charge of it, the one thing that kind of makes fans raise an eyebrow is they're kind of adamant on it being a PG-13. They feel like the PG-13 rating is what will help it really be a success, And surprisingly, McFarlane agrees to that, which I think was really shocking to his fans that he would kind of make that sacrifice because Spawn. We'll talk about the story when we get into the film, but it's definitely an R-rated comic.
Oh yeah,
very brutal, very violent. So already you're kind of hampering yourself by aiming for a PG-13. The other thing about Spawn, because as you said, it's very high concept, it's very fantastical, it was always going to have to be a special effects driven movie. And so knowing that, when they decide to make it into a film, they just recruit a special effects company called Pull Down Your Pants Pictures, which is a company formed by 3 former industrial ILM artists, the aforementioned Mark A.Z. Dippy, Clint Goldman, and Steve Spaz Williams.
Yep. And
the idea is that Dippy will direct, Goldman will produce, and Spaz Williams will be the second unit director and the visual effects supervisor. It says here that at the time they called this film an opportunity they basically looked at it as our ticket out of ILM, essentially, because they were still kind of affiliated with ILM. They had worked on Jurassic Park and some other big stuff at the time, and they really wanted to go off and make their own name. And they saw Spawn as the ultimate example. And here already, this is where you're starting to get into issues because you've hired special effects people to direct and kind of oversee the product. And they're looking at it more of as a special effects reel than a film.
Oh yeah, definitely. I have a lot to say about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to their credit, Alan B. McElroy, who is the co-writer, he had written on the comic book, and he also wrote on the Spawn cartoon. So it's like he knew the mythology. So that's like a good call.
Sure.
And to be fair, I don't know. I don't know what like Mark Dippy's connection was to the source material, but I worry. And watching the film, I get the feeling he was kind of more just a special effects guy.
Yeah.
And certainly hadn't been tested as a director yet. And to give him a movie this big, and ultimately, you know, a movie that got even bigger than they thought, because it was greenlit with a budget of $20 million. Mm-hmm. And as they're working on it, New Line was actually pretty happy with what they saw coming in. They started to see this as a movie with like more and more potential, and they actually started ballooning the budget up to get to that 40 to 45 million that is now the official like final budget. And a third of that just goes to effects.
Yeah. And the effects increased from 77 shots to 400 shots.
Yes.
And it was created by 22 different companies all over the world. And I think nearly half of the final effects showed up 2 weeks before the movie was released.
Yep.
So if that gives you a hint of what we're going to talk about.
Some of them look like they needed those couple more weeks too.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just crazy. I mean, I try to think of a version of this movie that only has 77 effect shots, though, and that does sound weird, right? Like this story and this property with only 77, but then to go from 77 to 400, and to go from 77 to 400 while you're making the movie, that really sounds like this is a poorly planned project from the beginning.
Big time. Big time.
But let's talk about that as we talk about the film, Spawn.
It's time. Imagine a substance with the power to destroy humanity. Imagine a creature insane enough to use it. Imagine a hero on the verge of creation. From flesh to steel.
You must visualize your objective.
From blood to blade.
Don't get cocky. You have a lot more to learn.
From man to spawn.
Peekaboo. I see you. We have harvested the ultimate weapon. Makes the Ebola virus look like a skin rash.
Congratulations. I say destroy the cosmos, ask questions later.
Who are you?
This is just what they want. You're playing their game.
Then I'll play dirty.
You've been violated, girly man.
Use your armor!
Now stay sharp. The night is young.
This summer, evil has a new enemy. Justice has a new weapon. And the world has a new hero. Spawn.
Al Simmons, a decorated military soldier/assassin, has been betrayed by covert government agency head Jason Wynn. Wynn orders his top assassin, Jessica Priest, to kill Simmons. After Simmons is murdered in a fiery demise, he is immediately transported to Hell, where the demonic ruler, Malbolgia, offers him a Faustian deal. If Simmons becomes his eternal servant and leader of Hell's army in the Armageddon, he will be able to return to Earth to see his beloved fiancée, Wanda Blake. Of course, Simmons accepts the deal and is transformed into Spawn, encased in a necroplasm suit and cape that is not only a living, breathing creature, but also his only protection in the world. Spawn then returns to Earth and attempts to reunite with Wanda, not knowing that 5 years has passed, and that his former partner, Terry Fitzgerald, has now married Wanda and has a child with her. Filled with grief and rage, Spawn seeks revenge on his former boss and killer, Jason Wynn, who has now made a deal with the disgusting clown, Malbolgia's crony sent to Earth to torment Spawn and manipulate the Armageddon. This deal was to develop a lethal virus to take over the world in exchange for ultimate power.
Yep, that's Spawn.
Mm-hmm.
I saw this movie in the theater. Opening weekend, I believe.
Okay.
As I said, I don't remember being excited for it. I feel like it really was a thing of, well, I was a really big Spawn fan a couple years ago. I guess I should probably check this out. just a kind of a general interest and curiosity. I haven't, and I know this has been true of other movies we've done, I haven't watched it since that day, like seeing it in the theater. And that probably ultimately tells you something. But then there always is that curiosity of when you return to something, might I like it more now? Did I have like skewed expectations at the time? Was I, maybe too harsh on it? No. So rewatching it the other night, I'm here to say I still find Spawn to be a pretty heavily flawed film, especially given the strength of the source material. And that's coming from someone who now, in retrospect, I don't even feel like the source material is as strong as like, 11-year-old me would have told you it is. But I think it still deserved a little bit better than this. What's your take on it?
So the first time I saw this movie, I was probably, probably like 10 years old, honestly. And I saw it in Canada at the time. There was a TV station called Space, the Imagination Station. That's the first time I saw Spawn. And I remember liking it as a kid, but again, I was a fucking kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I watched it a couple nights ago. As an adult, this is my review of Spawn. Spawn is a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And it might be, I hated it. Like Trev, okay, so we did a Nightmare on Elm Street episode, and that was your pick for worst that we've done yet so far.
Yeah.
This is so much worse than that. And
Oof.
I'm
not with you there, but I'm not going to
okay.
get very passionate about this.
Yeah, don't die on this hill.
Yeah.
I honest to God think this is such a piece of shit. It is top to bottom just a non-anything. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's such a fucking mess. It's filled with terrible, gross performances. It's not fun at all. The effects, which we kind of alluded to, are some of the worst I've ever seen in a big budget movie. I'm shocked. Like, I was shocked. We'll get into details, but those are my initial thoughts. Like, I really, really disliked it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things right off the bat. Like, I think there's ultimately two things here that really strike me about this film. So one of them is that Spawn is ultimately indicative of this. The book starts in 92. And as I said, the comic books were really enjoying this big boom period in the early 90s. But it's a period that comic book purists and hardcore fans kind of look back on very nebulously because, as I said, it was really style over substance. The artists became the stars, and the books were very heavily done on style. And that's definitely true of these early Spawn issues. Like, I reread them. Like I said, I reread the first 10 the other night. And, I mean, it was kind of nostalgic to go back to them. But it's ultimately like, oh, okay, the story here isn't terrible, but this is definitely more about how great McFarlane's artwork is.
Sure.
And also at this time, everything in comics was about how badass and extreme you could make it, So so when McFarlane is like, well, I don't want to do Spider-Man anymore. I'll go create this new superhero. How will I make him different than Spider-Man? He's from hell. And he has fucking this cape that's 3 miles long because he can look badass with it. And he's covered in chains that move around and rip people apart. It's just like, all right, I get it.
Yeah.
Now, that said, what's strange about that is I look back on that period of comics and it's like, oh God, you kind of like cringe a little bit because it's just so like grimdark and extreme. But the weird thing about this movie is it doesn't even get that right because this is a very oddly neutered version of that. Mm-hmm. And that's the ultimate disconnect here is that at least if you're going to make a movie of this character, at least go for it. As the HBO show did. I don't know if you ever saw that, Chris, but
no. Yeah.
The cartoon's not bad. Like, the cartoon is actually R-rated. It's a much better representation of the source material. This is neutered. Even in, I believe the version I watched the other night was the director's cut, not the initial PG-13 cut that was in theaters.
Okay.
But even this director's cut is nowhere near as violent or bloody as I think a Spawn fan would expect it to be. It doesn't feel as dark. There's something about the look of the film. It's got that generic, overly lit 90s look.
Made for TV.
Yes.
It looks made for TV.
Yes. And then I said there's two things. The other thing you have to talk about this film is the effects.
Yeah.
Because there are certain sequences in this that are just embarrassing.
Awful.
And I know you'll probably get some people coming in saying yes, but the time. No.
Nope.
I remember seeing this movie in the theater, and this is a big part of the reason I never revisited. I remember 16-year-old me walking out of the theater going, "What was with those effects?"
Yeah, because guess what? Guess what you saw that year? Jurassic Park: The Lost World.
Mm-hmm.
That movie came out in '97, and there's no excuse. There's no excuse for a big budget movie to come out and look like that. It looks like MS Paint.
Yeah, I mean,
it's bad.
The sequences in hell are. I mean,
it's hard to honestly, listeners. Okay, it's hard to really even tell you what it looks like. I can't even say it looks cartoony. I can't even tell you.
I would love if it looked cartoony.
Right? Like this is I know we sound hyperbolic or maybe even mean, but it is so do yourself a favor, like Google or YouTube scenes from hell in Spawn or scenes from Spawn in hell. They both kind of work. But regardless, go look at the hell scenes. Now come back.
Yeah.
You know what we're talking about. It's beyond atrocious. And this is a big budget movie. $45 million in 97 is pretty solid, I would say. No?
Yeah, I knew we were in trouble at the very beginning. So the movie starts with a sequence where Al Simmons, who is our hero, he's this mercenary who works for the CIA at the beginning, and he's on this mission. And part of the mission involves blowing up a plane. Chris, I don't know if you were like clocking this, if you were paying too much attention, but the plane explosion is so hilariously bad. It looks like that, like, you know, when like those like apps on your phone that like make explosions on photos. Like it literally looks like that. The plane blows up and it turns into a bunch of like little triangles. It's like what?
And the thing is there's so much fire imagery and terrible explosion imagery, and it all looks so bad that you can just it looks like tens of millions of dollars just burning up in front of your screen. It's something else.
Yeah, and just some of the decisions they made. Like, so Malebolgia, who's our devil character in this. So, you know, the character that whenever Spawn returns to hell, this is the giant demon that, you know, made the deal with him and is trying to use Spawn to unleash his armies of evil. I read that there was an idea initially for him to be a puppet. And that probably would have been way better. I mean, I like, even if that looked corny, there's something about the practicality of a puppet that's always more interesting.
You mean an animatronic puppet would look better than something from the TV show Reboot?
Whose mouth doesn't even move.
He doesn't even move.
As he speaks, his mouth does not move.
Yeah, as he speaks from Frank Welker, a famous voiceover artist.
Who I love.
I love him. Megatron.
Dr. Claw, which is the exact same voice he's using here.
You're so right. That's exactly what the voice is Dr. Claw.
If you won't lead my army, then you must die. Never bring me Spawn's head.
Yeah, he's just doing Dr. Claw, and the mouth isn't moving. They've made the excuse, since the filmmakers have said that the reason his mouth isn't moving is that they were trying to insinuate that he was speaking through hell. No. Come on, guys.
It's because they couldn't do it. They couldn't figure it out.
Yeah. And I mean, what's like the proof that the puppet and the animatronic would have looked better is that the Violator, the other villain in this film, some of the only like good effects in this movie are during a sequence in the alleyways when Spawn fights Violator. There actually was a big Violator animatronic for that, and in the shots where they use that, looks great.
Yep.
But for whatever reason, Malebolgia, they went pure CG in a pure CG environment, and yeah, I mean, I was talking to some friends after rewatching it, and the main thing I said was it looks like a fake movie.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah,
you're right.
There are parts that just don't look real. Like it looks like a Tim and Eric skit or something.
Yep.
Or like a movie that was like made to just like quickly made as like, as I said, a fake movie to be featured in a real movie, like something they'd be watching on the TV.
Well, and that's why, like I mentioned before about that TV channel I watched this on originally, the reason I wrote that down in my notes was because of the look. It was very reminiscent of those like piece of shit late night, sci-fi movies, just made for late night cable. And very oofy.
Yeah, there's something that really bothers me about, like, I guess this comes down to, as we were insinuating before I got into this. I hate being super mean because I don't know
Same.
like the
Same.
stories behind these people, but like as we said, this Marchese Dippy guy, Dippe, however you say his name, he's a special effects guy who gets put in charge of this movie. And to be fair, he's initially put in charge of a $20 million movie that turns into a $40 million budget movie as he's making it, but clearly he's more involved in, or he's more interested in the special effects. I've actually since seen an interview with Michael Jai White where he has bemoaned the same exact thing, where he says he was not happy with how the movie ultimately turned out because the version he thought he signed on to make and what he believed he was making at the time, he says they basically lost track of it because the director was clearly more interested in what he could do visual effects wise as they're making it.
Yeah.
And he would come up to Michael Jai White on set and tell him about all these like cool new effects he had planned. And Michael Jai White was like, okay, but we're making a movie about this guy who's back from the dead. He lost 5 years of his life. His wife is now married to his best friend. He's like, what about that? Like, what about the character stuff I should be sinking my acting chops into? And the director just couldn't care less.
And that's it's funny. We've now been recording, around 40 to 50 minutes right now. This is the first time we've mentioned Michael Jai White. Yeah. And that's telling because the movie is not interested in him. It's not interested in that character. He actually found the character pretty appealing. He says Spawn was the most tragic character I've ever encountered in any cinematic production. He was good to go, man. And like, there's this thing in this movie that was driving me crazy, and obviously you caught on to it. But the movie starts, and then he becomes Spawn, like immediately. Okay. And then through the movie, it's intercut with flashbacks of his past life with his wife and all this backstory shit. And I'm like, why didn't we spend 30 minutes watching his life with his wife, him being a great soldier, him loving his wife, him doing anything for her, because why is that interspersed? First of all, let me say, when I say it's intercut in, it's not even really cut in. We don't even see scenes. It's just kind of like shots of imagery of his past life. It's very bizarre because obviously they shot that shit.
I'll give you a better version, Chris, because the thing that really struck me the other night revisiting the comic books, because I hadn't read these in years. Mm-hmm. And I forgot that the way the story starts in the comics, and I don't understand at all why they dropped this for the movie, is that the way the book starts is you start and he's just already Spawn. He's Spawn, and he's just shown up in the alleyways of Rat City, which is like the little homeless encampment that he ends up kind of being adopted into. And he has no memory of who he is. He's just Spawn. He's like, I know that I've lost. He's like, somehow I know instinctively I've lost 5 years of my life. He keeps having flashes of Wanda, his ex-wife, and he's like, I don't know who that woman is. I know she was important to me. And the story, like we the reader are told he's Al Simmons, and we see like the devil kind of, loving the fact that he screwed this guy over.
Yeah.
But we're watching the character try to find out who he is and like try to discover his identity. And that's great. Like that's a good storytelling device. And the movie just drops that to give us a completely chronological telling of it, where you said like, it's just this like generic opener where he's this mercenary who gets betrayed and then killed and then suddenly he's Spawn. And it just feels so generic and lazy. And to remove like the framing device that worked in the comics in favor of that, I don't know. I just don't get it.
It's strange watching Al Simmons walk around and just say, Wanda. Mm-hmm. Right, Wanda?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like even that, I don't even know. Like fuck, I just watched this movie. Like it's so stupid that, and that's all he's doing. The whole movie is just moping around, and I don't give a shit because I have not seen their relationship. Why do I care as the viewer? Why should I care as much as the character cares when I'm the one that's sitting here and wasting my fucking time watching it? It's a baffling decision. That's so fun. That's so interesting to hear that, by the way, about the comic, because of course I don't really have knowledge of the comic as much, but that's perfect. They have that in this movie. They're doing it, but with him knowing. It makes no sense. It makes that's crazy. There's no way that they reshot, right? Like this is just the way that they did it. right?
Yeah, I think they just decided that maybe they felt like a movie has to have a more traditional narrative, which is dumb because no, be experimental with it.
Yeah.
Let the audience be off their not know what's going on for the first 20 minutes. Do something to pull us in rather than just this kind of really generic. Because you're right, it feels like a TV pilot the way the story unfolds.
Yeah,
it certainly looks like one. And the shame of it is when you said the thing about how we hadn't even mentioned Michael Jai White and how you can't really even get into his performance in it. He was like the right guy for this too. That's the real shame of it is so I really like Michael Jai White. At this point in his career, this really was meant to be like his big kind of Hollywood big budget star making thing. He would have only been he'd been kind of plugging along. So he's for people who don't know Michael Jai White, he's an actor and martial artist who at this point had been kind of just playing heavies in films, like stuff like Universal Soldier. And, films like Prototype and things. He's just kind of usually just like a heavy, like part of the bad guy gang or something. But 2 years before this, he played Mike Tyson in a TV movie about Mike Tyson. And that was like the first thing where we started to get a little bit more like, ooh, who's this guy,
Yeah.
And then Spawn comes along and it's I think it's supposed to be like a star-making performance, but the movie gives him nothing. And that's a shame because we've since seen how charismatic Michael Jai White can be. I mean, he finally really gets his due in that great 2008-2009 run where he does The Dark Knight, small role as Gamble, and then 2009 he really blows up with Black Dynamite, which he also co-writes, which is this great parody of blaxploitation films. He's hilarious in that. It's a cult film for a reason. That same year he also makes Blood and Bone, which is this incredible straight-to-video action movie that's now got a big cult following, and just in general now he's definitely one of those like. He's not. Unfortunately, I don't think he's ever going to be an A-lister, but I think he's like really found his place is at like the top of the B list, kind of. I think he's definitely got a fan base that's really excited for all his straight-to-video action fare. But he could have been a good Spawn, and I just hate that this movie gave him nothing.
And it's unfortunate too because at this time, there's not a lot of black-led superhero films.
I wanted to mention that too. This is the first ever.
This is the first ever.
This is the first ever black-led superhero film from Hollywood. Only for it's the only obviously for only 2 weeks though, because 2 weeks later another one comes out that Chris, we're gonna have to talk about because you know what I'm talking about, right?
I do know. I know.
2 weeks later we get Steel starring Shaquille O'Neal.
What have you done to me in this podcast? Why can't we just watch Blade?
Yeah, I was gonna say, okay, but that's the thing. We get Blade the next year.
Yeah.
So what's actually funny is that in that interview I was referencing earlier with Michael Jai White, where he talked about how the film kind of got away from them as they're making it, he actually mentions that he says like from what he understands, because New Line wasn't very happy with how this film turned out, and because they felt that might have been because they were too hands off with Mark A.Z. Dippy while they were making it. Michael Jai White says that he heard that then New Line was really more hands-on in Blade and was kind of like always peeking over Stephen Norrington's shoulder to be like, are you sure you got this? Was this coming together? Because we just did Spawn and it really didn't work out.
Wow.
And so like this movie, like the one thing to say is the shittiness of this movie might be directly responsible for the greatness of Blade. So I guess we have to at least give it that.
Yeah, thank God Spawn shit the bed, or else Blade could have been jeez. Yeah, so that sucks. It just, I guess, should we talk about the other performance, the other co-lead? Honestly, I might even say the lead of the movie.
Well, top build. He's got it. This is a Jack Nicholson Joker situation. Yeah,
really. So we're obviously talking about the clown, played by John Leguizamo, of Super Mario Brothers fame. He puts in a performance. And he's giving it his all. He's not phoning it in. That's for damn sure. That's for damn sure.
Hey, easy with that face of me. Oops. A wet one. I hope I didn't stain my underwear. Look at that. Skid marks.
Get away from me, you freak!
Just think of me as your guardian angel. The clown from hell. You're Jimmy Stewart, and I'm Clarence. Well, every time somebody farts, a demon catches her wings. Oops, twins.
Get away from me, you foul-smelling maggot!
Peekaboo, I see you. You know how hard this place is to find in the dark? It's times like these, I appreciate being a midget. My. What a pretty little dress. I wonder if she's got it in my size. Funny, he's our man. If you can't kill him, no one can. Yay, funny. S to the P to the A to the war. S to the P to the A to the R. Goes funny.
So I know I shit on this movie quite hard, and I'm not going to give it money props at all. But as far as performances go, like it is at least he's memorable. When you think of Spawn, you actually think of the clown.
Yeah, I will say it's strange because the clown is the human form of the Violator, which is this demon that is sent to Earth to kind of like, basically just fuck with Spawn, essentially.
Yeah.
And then but he can take this human form, which is this short little clown. And you look at this and you're like, well, there's only one actor who should have played this part. And that's Danny DeVito. Like, there's no doubt about it.
Oh, yeah,
right?
Totally.
But the thing is, Danny DeVito's already been Penguin in Batman Returns. So I don't know if they would have even floated that possibility to him, or if they did, if he would have been interested. But he's clearly the only actor who physically makes sense for the part and seems like he'd have the right attitude. To look at that character and how he's drawn in the comic and to say, let's get John Leguizamo is really strange. But we've talked about John Leguizamo before, and in fact, John Leguizamo is not just the star of Super Mario Brothers. Chris, he's also the star of our podcast within a podcast. So maybe it's time for another episode of Let's Go Leguizamo.
I like to party with my peeps, cruising cream, playing three-car money on these crazy streets, straight hustler. I'm all a scam man, I'm in it, so low to the flow, pick the pocket on a midget. Slick shyster, the best meister, living life in Miami's vice. Mash, see? Nobody messes with the frog, see? What's your sign now?
So yeah, like when we last talked about Leguizamo, when we last checked in with him, it was Super Mario Brothers, which was his first like lead role. And he was definitely an unknown at that time. That's not the case anymore. So there's a reason he has top billing in this. When we get to Spawn, he's now known for Carlito's Way. He was in Tu Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. He's an Executive Decision. Kind of a scene stealer in Romeo plus Juliet. And then this year, actually, 1997, he also does The Pest, which is, of course, where the theme song to Let's Go Leguizamo comes from.
Right.
So he's kind of a known. So on that aspect, it makes sense that they went to him. But of course, physically, he does not match this at all.
No.
So it's clearly going to have to be, you're going to have to do some work to make him the clown. And a lot of work does go into it. And the reason I know that is because, as is the case for usual of the show, I have in front of me my copy of Pimps, Hoes, Play-Haters, and the Rest of My Hollywood Friends, My Life by John Leguizamo. Chris, I'd like to read you a little bit of
Please.
John Leguizamo's story about making Spawn.
I've been dying to hear this all day.
Okay. So to preface this, before he goes to make Spawn, he's telling a story about how he got involved with this woman that he calls Teeny, and he's talking about this like great emerging love he had with her and how they went on this like trip, and he's talking about how this trip was paradise. And that's important because that leads into what he next says about Spawn. So I will pick up there. And then I went straight to hell. Well, to Hollywood, which is only about a block away, to film Spawn, where I play the fat, flatulent clown from hell. I love the comic book Spawn. Spawn was the first black superhero. Well, actually, John, no, not even close. By this point, we had Black Panther, we had, tons of other black superheroes. But okay, whatever. I was looking forward to playing a comic book character. I'm not good at being me. That's why I have to act. It's why all actors are actors, so we can spend as much of our lives as possible pretending to be other people. So we don't have to face ourselves and fix ourselves and grow up and all. Who knew what torture making that movie would be? Spawn was definitely the most physically taxing movie I've made so far. The fat, flatulent clown from hell was literally a pain in my ass. At this point, I'm wondering, does he think the name of the character is the fat, flatulent clown from hell? Because that's what he calls him every time. Did you see that movie? Can you imagine being in that costume? Every morning they put me into that fat suit. It was like I was wearing a big medicine ball. And then a mask that fit over my whole head and face, right up to the eyeballs and lips. Plus contacts and sharp fake teeth. It was like being in a giant condom. I know I can be a dick sometimes, but this was redonkulous. And yes, for those wondering, he does say redonkulous, and that's the kind of humor that you buy Pimps, Hoes, Play-Haters, and all the rest of my Hollywood friends for. It took me 4 hours every morning to get me ready, so once they got me into it, I couldn't take it off. They glued on the prosthetic mask, sticking it to every pore. It itches, but you can't scratch. After a while, my face actually started to blister from it, and calluses formed around my eyes. And it got hot as hell in there. I was sweating bullets. I sweated maybe 30 pounds off. I got paid a lot for it. $2 million and a 2-year production deal. All I can tell you is I fucking earned it. So it's good to hear he got paid, for sure. And we see where some of that budget went.
Yeah, definitely.
But now he gets into the most, challenging part for him.
Okay.
To make matters worse, I did the whole part squatting down. The clown is a short little fat guy, so I had to make myself shorter than I already am. At first they tried to rig various prosthetic devices that would give the illusion, like these bent stilts that would go up inside my pants and end in a seat I could balance on. But everything they invented constricted my movement and put me off balance. In the end, it was easier for me to squat. I squatted and even squat walked through the whole shoot. By the end of filming, I had titanium buns. I could have bent steel with my buttocks. Not that that's anything to aspire to, but you never know. It's always a good skill to fall back on. If my acting career tanked, I could get a job in a freak show. The mighty Leguizamo, bend steel bars in his ass. Sometimes shooting a scene would go on so long that I couldn't hold the squat anymore. My legs would be shaking and then they'd give out and I'd involuntarily pop up to a standing position. Pop, cut, more like a jack-in-the-box than an evil clown. I was squatting in that costume for 60 days. 60 days of that torture. Long days, too. I had to leave my house at 4 a.m., and then it was either do as much as you can every day or spend more days doing it. Michael and I were both like, no, let's just get this over with. So, yeah, he wasn't having a great time physically. But, at least, the movie turned out as he wanted, right?
Absolutely.
Hold on.
Okay.
Spawn got screwed because the studio couldn't decide whether to make it for adults, like the original comic book, or for kids. At first it was going to be R-rated, then the studio decided it should be PG-13. And we heard rumors that the studio didn't believe that a black superhero would carry a movie for a general audience. It went through a lot of rewrites and editing, and the story suffered from it. It's still a good movie. I'm going to cut in right here and say, John, come on. And it's dark and grungy and nasty, but it should have been a lot darker and grungier and nastier. The clown was a huge part. It was a tour de force role, and I ran away with it. I took it seriously. I prepped by reading all the Spawn comics the film is based on, and I actually took classes at a clown school in LA. I took tumbling lessons, juggling, mime, all the clown techniques, looking for inspiration. I ad-libbed like crazy. The character was funny as written, but I still needed to update him and punch him up. I took the clown as far as that character would go. Did I mention I ate live maggots on a pizza in one scene? I pick off the anchovies first. The clown hates anchovies. Is that mad method or what? I've since read in other takes on that those were not actually maggots that he ate. They were waxworms, so I'll call him out on that as well. But but actually waxworms are bigger than maggots, and that scene is appropriately disgusting.
Yeah,
and
didn't he immediately
threw up right after, yeah. And they had to film it twice, I read.
Oh, gross.
But yeah, so that's John Leguizamo's take on that. And I will say, as he said, and as you alluded to, yeah, I don't know that I like his performance, but he is really committing. And it's...
Oh yeah, I'm not saying I like it.
Yeah.
let me be clear. I do not like it.
But it's like, it's not... This is complicated, because is it that we don't like the performance, or is it just that character is so annoying that because he's doing a good job, like, that's what makes it grating, Like, is he doing a good performance as a really, really unlikable character? Or is it a bad performance? I don't think it's a bad performance, because he really is giving it his all. It's kind of cool to hear that he did all that clown school and stuff. Like, he really cared.
I guess we just don't like the character. Like, that's what it is. And I guess, like you just said, that's the point. Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, what I'm saying is that just give him the Oscar.
It's weird because there's something about how that character really works on the page, and it just does not work on screen. No. And I think part of it is that whole thing about asking him to squat.
Yeah.
This is why I say you shouldn't have John Leguizamo play this part. And this is why I say Danny DeVito is really the only actor who could have, if you're going to go for like a physical match, first of all, why does that matter? Why not just make the clown tall? Who cares, If Wolverine can be tall in movies, I'm sure Clown can.
Totally.
But the problem with the squatting thing is that he always looks like a guy that's squatting.
Yes.
It doesn't look natural at all.
At first, I thought maybe he was like on his knees or something, and then no, like there's a lot of shots that are pulled back, and he is always bent, like always hunched over. That like it does look extremely uncomfortable. And it's so weird. Like again, why is he crouching? Why is he like this? What is he doing?
It looks uncomfortable for him, and you can't. It breaks like your ability to connect with the scene because you're paying more attention to that.
The whole time I'm sitting there,
disbelief is lost.
Again, my rant on rules. If everybody's standing in a movie, why is this guy crouching?
So I don't know, a confusing performance from an actor that we still love, and hopefully we'll have on the show someday. I'm sure once he hears about how popular this podcast is, he'll be begging to come on.
Oh, absolutely.
But John, we still love you. Keep us in mind. Maybe we'll be a focus of a chapter in Pimps, Hoes, Play Haters 2. The continuing adventures of the rest of my Hollywood friends. But until then, this has been another episode of Let's Go Leguizamo.
Yeah, it's gross that he threw up with those maggots.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't blame him, but I guess we should talk about the other big performance in this. The actor who I still to this day am shocked is in this film.
Oh, Marissa's mom from the OC?
No. Okay, actually, let's talk about her, though. Can we?
Sure.
Let's put a button in the other one. So you're, of course, talking about Melinda Clarke as Priest in this film. Jessica Priest, a character created for the movie because she's the assassin that kills Al Simmons at the beginning, thus sending him to hell and having him turn into Spawn. She was created for the film because the character who killed Al Simmons in the comic was actually a character from Rob Liefeld's Youngblood. And, that whole thing of trying to connect the Spawn or the Image universe. Rob Liefeld wouldn't give them the rights to the character to use in the movie. So this is where right away we're seeing like the problems with this whole Image model. Is that that's right. If everything's creator owned, you have to get that creator to sign off. So instead they just create this Jessica Priest character and they get Melinda Clarke. So her from the OC. I want to bring her up because as a horror fan, I think most horror fans will know her and probably love her as I do, as the lead of Return of the Living Dead Part 3. Where she plays the hottest zombie ever on film. So Return of the Living Dead 3 is this really cool cult film. It's kind of like a zombie version of Romeo and Juliet. The previous two Return of the Living Dead films were like these really funny, well, the first one's really funny, the second one's not that great, but these zombie comedies. And then the third one, they decided to go like much more serious and dark with it. And it's this like Romeo and Juliet story where this guy finds out his dad works for this military, experimental division that is turning zombies into soldiers. And his girlfriend gets killed in a motorcycle accident, and he breaks into the facility and uses the trioxin chemical to bring her back. And in the Return of the Living Dead universe, the reason zombies eat brains is because it kind of, they constantly are in pain if they don't eat a brain. She comes back because
did they do it to rhyme?
No, unfortunately not. That would have been even better. But
that'd be great.
But she comes back, with enough of her like kind of personality intact, but she still has to eat brains. She doesn't want to because she's trying to retain her humanity. So she discovers that if she self-mutilates, that kind of like dulls the pain for her. And throughout the course of the film, you see her kind of mutilate herself more and more. And eventually she has this like amazing look where she's punctured herself with all these different piercings, put pieces of glass through her face and through her wrists, run chains through her skin. And it's this incredible makeup job.
That is the hottest zombie Trev's ever seen.
I know that sounds crazy. I urge anyone listening right now, look up Return of the Living Dead 3, do a Google image search. She's going to be the image that pops up, and you tell me that that's not oddly sexy. But she's awesome in that film, and I kind of like her in this, probably just because I don't like her in this, but she's a babe. They put her in some great costumes.
She's super hot. Good for you. Mrs. Cooper for the win.
They do kill her super early in the movie, which I thought was strange until I found out that she was initially supposed to come back in the third act. She was supposed to be resurrected, and a cybernetic version of her was supposed to show up to fight Spawn. And that is one of the sequences that was cut when they decided to deviate more of the budget towards other special effects, and in particular CGI effects. So that's kind of telling in the film because she is set up as like another big primary villain, and she gets taken out like I think it's even before the halfway point of the film. Like he comes back as Spawn and just kind of instantly takes her out at that party scene. But no, I have nothing really more to say about Melinda Clarke or the Jessica Priest character, because why would I? But what I was really alluding to is, let's talk about her boss. Let's talk about who plays Jason Wynn, the CIA head who betrays Al Simmons and sends him to his doom.
Charlie Sheen's dad.
That's right.
Yeah, Martin Sheen's in this, and I think he's wearing a painted-on beard.
Well, if it's not painted on, there's definitely some grease paint going into it. To accentuate it. Yeah.
Yeah. Now he gives a performance.
Fitzgerald may be a spineless bureaucrat, but he's doing a great PR job for me. The whole world is going to hell in a handbasket, but thanks to him, it's just another story on the 5 o'clock news.
Like lambs to the slaughter.
The best is yet to come. There it is, Jess. Finally ready. Heat 16. Makes the Ebola virus look like a skin rash. That North Korean biochemical operation really paid off. We have harvested the ultimate weapon from those diseased bodies. And now we have the only vaccine.
Was there ever any doubt?
Never. Now we have weapons in place to disperse Heat 16 over half of this godforsaken globe. Soon the whole world will be at my command. Anyone who refuses to join my consortium won't be around to argue.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's doing something. Again,
President Bartlett.
I couldn't believe, I was watching this film and I was thinking, like, good Lord, where was Michael Sheen at this point in his career? And it's kind of amazing. Like, West Wing happens 2 or 3 years later after this, I think.
Well, Michael Sheen was in different movies. This is Martin Sheen.
Oh, sorry, Martin Sheen. Michael Sheen could have easily played this part too.
Actually, yeah, I think Michael Sheen would have been better in the.
Well, actually, this is probably the most Michael Sheenish performance Martin Sheen has ever given.
Yeah, this is. No, that was good. That was funny. I was trying to go off on that. I was like, the sheeniest Michael Sheen Martin could ever Michael Sheeny Martin in his entire Charlie Sheen's dad's life.
Well, because this is another one, right? Where what do you think of this performance? Because I kind of like what he's going for. Like, I read that Martin Sheen always wanted to be in a comic book movie.
Mm-hmm.
And in particular, he wanted to do this one because his grandkids were really excited about the idea of him being in Spawn.
Okay.
And I think he definitely comes across as someone in this film who's just like, I'm in a comic book movie.
Oh, yes.
I'm going to lean into it. I mean, you just heard that. I mean, he's going for it. It's bad, but is it the right kind of bad? Discuss amongst yourselves.
Yeah. That's the thing. We've said this before in, I guess, actually in the Wild Wild West episode, I would say, is that Kenneth Branagh is like a shitty character, but he's giving it his all. He recognizes the kind of movie they're making, and nobody else does. And I think that's the difference here, is that Michael Sheen knows what he's working on a different level. I don't know how to explain it. He's not some genius in the movie. I don't want to give him that many props, but he's definitely hamming it up to a level where I think even John Leguizamo's at, but our hero and everyone else isn't. So it just doesn't, it does not mesh. Like, if your hero is kind of hamming it up, it sort of works. Like, that's the guy I'm watching.
Or if your hero's interesting.
Yeah, that too. Like, that's the thing. Like, there's nothing in this movie that is there's nothing about Spawn that's attracting me to watch this. So when a hammy character comes up, I'm just kind of annoyed. I'm just kind of like, oh my God, like, I see what you're doing, Sheen.
God, you're so right, you too, because I was thinking about that earlier where I said the thing how the clown works on the page and not on the screen. I realize now, as you're saying that's a big part of it, right? Where there's something about comic books where maybe it's just because every month you're only reading a 22-page story, or you just have a different expectation. But that kind of tonal inconsistency, it doesn't have the whiplash it does in a film. And yeah, like what Martin Sheen and John Leguizamo are doing, it just does not vibe at all with the darker tone and storyline the movie is trying to present. So they both feel, especially Leguizamo, but Martin Sheen to another degree, they feel so out of place in the story, bouncing off of and interacting off the other characters.
Yeah, it just doesn't mesh. It does not mesh. I don't know who the actor is. I don't know who's the actor again that Martin Sheen's usually in the scene with. Al Simmons' best friend slash
D.B. Sweeney.
D.B. Sweeney.
Star of The Cutting Edge.
Hold for applause. D.B. Sweeney is playing it so fucking serious that it is, again, it just doesn't work. And it's almost like Martin Sheen's looking at him in the scenes being like, bro, do you know what we're doing right now?
You know how, what's funny is that could have been even worse, because do you know who was cast in that role originally and dropped out for another film?
I do not. Who?
Edward Norton.
No shit.
Edward Norton dropped out of Spawn to make Rounders.
Wow, really?
Mm-hmm.
Worst
I
mistake
mean, good
of his
call.
career. Oh, wait, sorry.
The idea of super serious actor Edward Norton on the set of Spawn is very amusing to me.
Yeah.
And just like probably the headache he would have been.
Mm-hmm.
But to get back to the Martin Sheen of it again, and again, like the problem isn't him necessarily; it's that no one else is doing what he's doing.
Yeah.
But he's still giving a performance. I will contrast that with, I'll tell you what's a truly bad performance in the film, and that is Nicole Williamson as Cagliostro. Cagliostro is this like, in the film is revealed to be this like ancient medieval warrior that's been walking the earth for centuries, and he becomes kind of Spawn's mentor.
First
now,
of all,
Nicole Williamson, go ahead.
You heard me just like, I didn't really reply when you said that name of that character, because I was like, who the fuck is that character? And as soon as you said ancient warrior, go on.
Well, Nicole Williamson, I don't know how familiar you are with him, Chris, but he is like one of those like classic. So he's British, classic British actor. Once I brought up his Wikipedia so I could make sure I get some of this right. Once described by John Osborne as the greatest actor since Marlon Brando, he was described by Samuel Beckett as touched by genius and viewed by many critics as the Hamlet of his generation during the late 60s. And he bears that out with amazing work in on stage and in film throughout like the 60s, 70s, and 80s. This is his final film performance, and that is so sad. And you can just tell he doesn't give a shit, you know? Now, he's also, because he's one of those famous British actors, as is the case with many of them, he was also a very heavy drinker. And near the end of his life, having like a lot of health problems and stuff, and he was battling cancer when he passed away later in life. But I don't know, like he definitely doesn't seem locked in. But and then the problem is not only is he like not committed and like just not compelling, but then they give him the voiceover of the film too.
No, not the voiceover. The voiceovers. There's about 4 of them at the worst parts of the movie. They're just in the movie.
Yeah.
It's not like a prologue epilogue thing. They just sprinkle it through, just like those stupid fucking flashbacks. It just, hey, get the structure right. Come on, guys. I don't know. That I thought that old. I wrote. This is my. Because I had no idea what the fucking guy's name is.
If you know him from anything, I don't know if you ever saw Excalibur, but he played Merlin in that, and he's pretty awesome.
I think I did see that as a kid. Anyway.
Oh, he's also the priest that shows up to do the exorcism in the third act of Exorcist 3. The weirdly added in, like, bizarre exorcism at the end.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, a much better religious, horror-based film. By the way, we blew past this, and I just forgot. I did want to say, but just in case any of our listeners were worried that it's not clear enough when you watch the film that Martin Sheen and Melinda Clarke's characters are evil, no, don't worry, because during a scene where they're hanging out in their office, they do show that Martin Sheen has pet scorpions and she's playing with a pet tarantula. So the movie does definitely do its homework to tell us they're bad.
Yep.
Yeah.
Filmmaking. That's what in the industry they call it, mise en scene.
Yes, Mark AZDP, the director of Spawn and later Frankenfish.
Yes, and a bunch of Garfield cartoons.
Mm-hmm. Definitely a master of mise en scene.
Yeah, mise en scene.
Yeah. And one final performance we should highlight. Well, 2. Todd McFarlane himself pops up in an extended cameo as a bum that Spawn almost shoots in the face, and then just oddly hangs around in the background for the next minute. If you don't know what he looks like, that wouldn't pop out to you, but I find it very distracting. But maybe movie fans will be excited to know that the young boy, the young homeless boy that Spawn befriends in Rat City is played by Miko Hughes, who people might know as Gage in the original Pet Sematary, or perhaps as the boys have a penis, girls have a vagina kid from Kindergarten Cop.
And that's where I know him from. Or am I only thinking about Kindergarten Cop? I swear he's in a bunch of shit. Oh,
Nico
he was
Hughes?
in a bunch of commercials too, I think.
Well, he's also the kid in New Nightmare.
That's it as well.
Yeah.
I'm thinking New Nightmare. Yep. Okay. Yep.
And apparently he had a recurring role as Aaron on Full House. And I know you're a big Full House guy.
That's where it is. That's where it is. He's Michelle's boyfriend.
Okay, I don't know what you're talking about, but I'll take your word for it.
Oh, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Back to Spawn.
No, that's, I mean...
Yeah, I don't know. I think this movie's trash. Like, I really do. Like, I don't know, man. Like, I'm really trying to. So, for listeners, I have a star system where we all do. I think when we log our movies onto in our minds or on Letterboxd or whatever. And like, I rarely give 0 stars to a movie. Like, I have like a list of maybe like 7 movies that I've given 0 stars to. I'm really close to giving this one 0. I'm really close, man. And it's because it's like, I don't know what I can give anything to. Like, I don't know. It's bad special effects. It's got a terrible main character. The villain annoys me. The other villain doesn't know what movies he's in. What else? The writing is terrible. The editing sucks. There's no fun, sweet climax.
Whoa. Chris, you're telling me, you just said the climax is bad. You're telling me that as you were watching this, huge special effects driven comic book movie about an assassin who is recruited to be the leader of Hell's army and decides to go against the devil, fight against him with his own powers, and lead a war of good against the force of evil. You're saying that you didn't want to see the climax play out in a living room of a suburban home?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Oh, all right. You're probably right. Yeah, I couldn't believe it.
Shocked me.
I couldn't remember for the life of me. There were certain things I remembered from this movie, like, having seen it over 20 years ago now. And like, I was, and I could not remember for the life of me while I was watching it, how it ended.
Yeah.
And now I know why, because what the hell, dude? Like, we're not getting, like, the last 15 minutes of this film play out inside a house.
Yeah.
No, at certain points they go into the fireplace and go to hell, which is even worse because, as you said, it looks like, MS Paint. But then it comes back and it's just in this living room. One of those stupid movie things too, where they're like, a giant demon appears, is throwing this family around, Spawn's fighting it, and none of the neighbors hear it apparently or anything. Like,
I know.
And then there's that super bizarre moment where after Spawn and Cagliostro return from hell, they're like just sitting casually next to the fireplace talking, and like Wanda and her new husband are sitting on the couch just chatting.
Yeah,
like
just chatting.
Your dead ex-husband returned as a zombie superhero, and a medieval knight are literally sitting 4 feet away from you, and now you're just like, whatever. Like, that's not interesting enough to run away or anything.
And Trev, okay, all right. Al Simmons, also known as Spawn, the whole movie is like, Wanda, I gotta get back to Wanda. I gotta fucking save Wanda. I want to be with Wanda. Did I mention that I love Wanda? In that scene, he doesn't go over to Wanda. You'd think he'd go over and they'd have an emotional moment.
Well, they have that whole weird. This is a writing problem, because they have that moment where he's talking to Cagliostro and he says something like, "I'm not part of her life now" or something anymore. But the problem is the movie never shows you that moment where he realizes it. They just have him say it there at the end, and it's like, well, wait, why? What? Did he come to this? Why did he come to this realization? And at this point, his friend, who is now with Wanda, knows he's Al Simmons. Does Wanda know? We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
Is the friend going to tell her? If he doesn't tell her, isn't that kind of shitty? Like, isn't that something she should know, that her beloved dead husband is back? I don't know.
It's also kind of ambiguous if the kid is his.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, did you catch that? Like, that's supposed to be a thing, right?
I think in the comic, this is weird because I just read it the other night and already I'm forgetting. But I think in the comic, the kid is not his. I think it is like the friend's. There's also a weird thing where in the comic that friend was also black.
Yeah, I heard the reason they changed it. Yeah, it sounds really shitty. It sounds really shitty.
The studio made it's just our listeners can probably guess. The studio made them change it because they didn't think people would want to see 2 black people in a movie, essentially.
That's basically what it is. They did not want it to seem like the demographic was only for black people.
Yep.
How fucked is that?
Mm-hmm. Oh, you said that you have nothing positive about this movie. I mean, Teresa Randall, pretty cute.
Oh yeah, she's banging.
Yeah.
She's banging. Not when she's like pretending to be the clown though, and she's giving a kind of off the chain. But I mean, at that point, I was pretty checked out, so I don't know if I was really paying attention.
I mean, we can't even really get into like score horror stuff here because this is a Graham Revell score, and it sounds like a Graham Revell score.
Yeah, it sounds like trash. It's everything's trash. This movie's trash. It's just what it is. It's like you're not even really trying to defend it, but even the
no.
Yeah, it's like it is. It's awful, and I haven't watched a movie like this in a long time. Like I have seen a lot of bad movies in my life. I know Trev has as well, but then there's bad movies like Spawn, where it feels like it's just a complete and utter failure on every single level. And you kind of wonder, and you're kind of bewildered by the burning of cash that went into this, and nobody during was like, "Yo, I think we fucked up." Nothing in the editing room. They have the footage of the flashbacks. They have it. They filmed it.
Well, the problem here is this was doomed from the start because there's two problems that hamper this. So it's an effects-driven movie. The early posters even called this like the special effects event of the summer or something.
Oh, can I actually cut you off there for a second?
Mm-hmm.
This is from our friend Roger Ebert.
Oh, I knew this was coming.
We love Roger Ebert. Okay, big fan.
That doesn't mean we always agree with Roger Ebert.
No, I'm just gonna say one sentence from his review of Spawn. As a visual experience, Spawn is unforgettable. And he gave it 3.5 stars out of 4. This is Garfield all over again for Roger Ebert.
I mean, to be fair, he's right that as a visual experience, Spawn is unforgettable. Because I have never forgot that shot of him crashing down into the party with that CGI cape flowing behind him.
That's funny. The scene that I always remember.
Not for the reason that Roger Ebert is saying.
Oh, God, no. The scene that I always remember is the Violator smashing Spawn to the ground because that's the only thing that they rendered because they show it about 50 times. It does no other move than grab Spawn, lift him up, and smash him on the ground. 3.5 stars.
Yeah, that shocked me to see that he gave it 3.5.
Crazy.
Because even like he says that he says that thing where it's like Spawn verges on being a surrealistic art film.
Ugh.
Like that makes it sound awesome, but it's not that. It's just a generic superhero film with bad effects. Oh, for some reason I just remember the scene where Priest kicks Spawn in the balls and his belt buckle comes out and bites her on the ankle.
And it comes out like a dick. Yeah. Yes.
We should mention really quickly, just because I'm sure if any Spawn heads are listening, they'll want us to mention. And this is I guess if you're looking for small things to give the movie credit for, this was one of the first comic book movies to pepper in little fun Easter eggs for fans. So there is a part during, like, we keep talking about this party scene, which is Spawn kind of crashes this party that Wynn is Wynn and Priest are at. And before Spawn shows up, the camera focuses on this woman walking through the crowd in a green dress with earrings on that look like the Spawn logo. That's Angela, which is a famous character from the comics, the character that Neil Gaiman created that led to a lot of their stuff, their problems. And then the cops who are taking Wynn out at the end are Sam and Twitch, which are two big supporting characters in the Spawn universe who would go on to have their own critically acclaimed book, actually, written by Brian Michael Bendis. So, that's kind of fun that they pepper in those little things. The Angela thing even feels like it's there to set up, her being in the sequel. But obviously that doesn't happen. Let's see, any other positive things? Nope. No.
When you said the sequel, I was going to say, can we just move on and talk about...
Well, before I move on, let me just say this.
Sure.
Let me just wrap up with this. And I don't know if you knew I was going to say anything about this, but if there's anything good that came out of this film, though, I do want to mention the soundtrack. Because Spawn, the album, is one of the best soundtracks ever, in my opinion. And I know that's like nostalgia speaking, and I think that's going to be... But you're probably going to hear that echoed from a lot of people of my generation.
Yeah. That
soundtrack was a very big deal that summer and beyond. And the thing with that soundtrack was... so a couple of years before this, there was a movie called Judgment Night. I don't know if you've ever seen that film.
Yeah, I have, yeah.
Yeah. That had a really cool soundtrack where they teamed up a bunch of hip-hop artists with rock artists, and every track was like a collaboration.
Cool.
So those same producers were recruited to do the Spawn soundtrack, and they did the same thing with mashing up rock artists with like electronica artists. And so you had the Crystal Method and Filter do a song together. You had Marilyn Manson and the Sneaker Pimps, Korn and the Dust Brothers, Butthole Surfers and Moby together. There's a Metallica remix done by DJ Spooky. You have Tom Morello working with The Prodigy.
Cool.
Silverchair and Vitro, Henry Rollins and Goldie. I'm not a huge Incubus fan, but there's a great song that's Incubus and DJ Greyboy. I love this soundtrack. I would heavily recommend going and listening to it.
I definitely will.
It's barely featured in the movie. It's really it's oddly one of those almost more like music inspired by the film kind of soundtracks, you know.
Right.
But it's awesome. I love it.
Cool. No, I'll definitely check that out.
Yeah. It's better than the Graham Revell score, that's for sure.
Okay. But yeah, you mentioned setting up for the sequel. Well, the sequel has been in development hell since '98. Todd McFarlane likes to kind of rear his head every few years, saying, "I got a script, guys. I'm working on it. So, in one point in 2007, he says on a serious radio show, he goes, "It's coming out no matter what. Even if I have to produce, direct, and finance it myself, it's gonna come out." All right, flash forward 2 years, where nothing has been happening. Then he says he's begun writing a new screenplay for it. He says, "The story has been in my head for 7 or 8 years, and the movie idea is neither a recap or a continuation. It's a standalone story that'll be R-rated, creepy, and scary." So kind of, for an older audience. Now, flash forward again, 2011. And I think Michael J. White is when he actually starts saying, yeah, I'd be down for a sequel. Or was he just kind of saying that to be nice?
No, I think he it might be a little bit of A, a little bit of B. I think he probably was looking at it as a missed opportunity and probably wants another shot at it.
Right. Well, in 2013, it starts to sound like Jamie Foxx is very, very interested in being a part of the reboot. A few years later go by, and finally, in February 2016, McFarlane announced that he has completed the film's script. A year later after that, Blumhouse Productions, a fantastic film studio who has made countless awesome films, especially they did the new Halloween, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they've been taking old properties and making them better. Or not better, but you know what I mean. So that's in 2017. Blumhouse is like, yeah, we want to start doing this. We're gonna be, start production by February of 2018. Well, in May of 2018, it's finally announced that Jamie Foxx is going to be Spawn. So now wheels are starting to roll, and we're like, okay, it's finally happening. And then a few months later, it's reported that Jeremy Renner might be a part of it as well. Keeps getting delayed. December 2019, McFarlane hires another writer to polish the script because we all remember that he is on himself about writing. And then they're saying that it's going to come out in 2020. And then here we are. Here we are in 2021.
And in fact, I don't know if you saw this, but just a couple weeks ago, Michael Jai White was interviewed, and he actually had something very interesting to say about the direction of this new film.
Yes, he did.
Do you mind if I read this quote?
Of course, yeah. Go ahead.
So it says, in an interview with Comic Book Resources, White revealed McFarlane has some strange ideas for the planned movie. White says, McFarlane has been trying to get a new movie up and going for 23 years, so I don't know. The last time I saw him, he was telling me about his idea of Spawn being ethereal fog that you don't see, like Jaws, and he strikes and you never see him. And I'm like, okay, good luck with that. Yeah, this is the frustrating thing, because I do think there's a good Spawn movie to be made. I think it's like I said, the HBO cartoon, which isn't great, but was pretty cool for the time. And even sitting down the other night and looking at those comic books again and going, okay, this is a book that's a little bit more style over substance, but that style, it is pretty cool. It's undeniably cool. And now you do have a book that has been running consistently. Well, like I said, there's been some inconsistencies here and there.
Sure.
But it's been running since 92. It's up in the 300s issue-wise. It's at this point got a large, expansive mythology. Clearly still has a fan base. Obviously a smaller fan base now than it used to, but a fan base. There's been multiple spin-offs, multiple mini miniseries. There's other characters you can kind of delve into. And at this time where we finally are actually getting comic book movies right, I'm sure there's a movie here.
Yeah.
The problem that's standing in the way is Todd McFarlane.
Yeah.
Because he wants complete creative control. And now, as we said, this new one, he wants to write and direct. Yeah. And if we're talking about Mark A.Z. Dippy not being a director, what? Are you going to give the wheels over to Todd McFarlane?
I know. And it's like kind of the same. It'll be the same problems, because think of it this way: Mark. Sorry, whatever. Mark. Sorry, Mark. Sorry, Mark.
You know what? We know we've been shitting on you, but at this point, we're just on a first name basis with you.
Yeah, let's just leave it at that. Mark was all about his reel, like his VFX reel, right? Mm-hmm. Now, McFarlane is known for his visual style, and that's really it. He's just going to focus on the visuals again. That's it.
But it's going to be an even worse problem, because here's the thing, like, so with Blumhouse doing it, Blumhouse's whole thing, right, is they don't do any movies like over $4 million, right? Or like really, they try not to go, they at least try not to go above 10, right? That's their whole thing, is they have this deal where keep the budgets low, then we can maximize our profit.
Well, maybe that's the reason why he's going to do it with Fog.
Maybe, you're right. But that's the thing, is like even McFarlane has said, and to be fair, this is the right thing to say, where he's like, oh, I kind of learned my lesson. The next one will be like an R-rated horror movie. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. That's what it should be. But with that low of a budget, I don't know. Maybe Spawn shouldn't be done as a low budget horror movie. Like this is the kind of actually requires a budget. But then once you get into a budget, then you don't want a first time director who like has kind of who's too attached to the project. I don't know. It's just it sounds like a bad idea all around.
Dude, give it to Netflix. They got fucking money to burn, man. They just
give it to a director. This is the thing. Earlier I said that there was 2 problems syncing this, and I didn't even get to the second one. And this is a great place to bring it back, because I said the first thing was the effects being bad.
Right.
The second thing is ultimately just a question of tone with this film. I mentioned this earlier, but I hate the look of this film, and it's that look that all these films of this era had. And I hate how so many comic book movies of this time, and Daredevil's early 2000s, but Daredevil had the same issue, where you look at this comic book that in your head as a fan, when they make the movie for this should be kind of like really down and dirty. The film should probably have like a grain on it. It should be very like, kind of film noir-esque looking. And this movie does not have that. This is a dark movie, but it has that like, just that flat, kind of flat cinematography.
Yeah.
Doesn't look right. And it always bothers me that the one movie that got this right was The Crow. How The Crow looks is how Spawn should look. Mm-hmm. That's how Daredevil should look. That's how Elektra should look. And instead, it's like they try to push it to the mainstream too much. So they say, let's make it PG-13. Let's remove all the violence. Let's take all like the adult elements away. Let's make sure it looks like a Superman movie. And it's like, that's not Spawn, buddy.
And that's just going to continue happening too. Like Spawn is not going to happen that way regardless. Like you're right. Like even we've talked about Blade and how fucking sweet that movie is. And Blade looks good. Like that's a good looking movie. And then Marvel Studios says they're making Blade with Mahershala Ali. That's a great actor, but guess what? Blade's not going to look like Blade. It's going to be.
No, you know what it's going to look like? It's going to look like Blade Trinity.
You're right. That's exactly what it'll look like. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is also what Spawn looks like.
You're so right.
Yep.
Yeah. But just in general, like, we talk a lot about movies being, a time capsule or a piece of film history. Spawn is for reasons, not all great, but I don't know. It's like I think the movie's dog shit.
Yeah,
but I at least sorry.
No, I was just saying I want to put a quick button on this so I don't leave it as a dangling plot thread here.
Sure.
I mentioned earlier how I felt like the failure of Spawn actually made Image kind of change. And what I meant by that is if Spawn had been huge, I think Image would have continued in the direction it initially was meant to be, where all these kind of creators who jumped ship, even though they had their own studios within Image, it was still an Image universe, right? Like I said, the Youngblood characters would interact with Spawn. Right. And Savage Dragon, another Image character, would come into the other books, and Spawn would go in their books and things. And it was still meant to be like, just like there's a DC universe and just like there's a Marvel universe, there was an Image universe. And not too long after this film, you start to see that go away. And Image has actually evolved over time to really, a lot of those creators who first formed it have left. As we know, Jim Lee goes back to DC, actually takes his Image characters with him and sells them to DC. And Image no longer is an Image universe. Instead, Image, and I actually think this is a much better version of Image. It's much cooler what it is today. It is a publisher that is primarily designed just to be creator-owned titles, but it's essentially all these creators have an idea for a book that they just want complete control over. They go to Image, and Image publishes that book for them. So you have all these books like Saga and Sex Criminals, Bitch Planet, all these awesome books that I love, but they don't interact with each other. They're all their own continuities and all everything. And so, and I think that's because this was the test, right? Can Spawn be on the same level as Batman and Superman? Nope.
Yeah. What do you think if this did take off though? Like what would you want this sequel to be? You always ask me this question. I want to ask you first.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was definitely stories to dive into in the comics. Like I said, I think the natural thing to do with the second movie would be Angela, who is a fun character, has a great look. Actually, she is now a Marvel character. Neil Gaiman ends up him, like we said, him and McFarlane get involved in some of their own kind of legal challenges, and Gaiman eventually ends up with full control of Angela and sells her to Marvel. And now Marvel has actually made her into Thor and Loki's sister. But yeah, I think if you had been able to get to that before that happened, she probably would have been the protagonist or antagonist in the next film.
Yeah.
And then you kind of just end the trilogy with the final battle between Spawn and Malebolgia, right? Which I'm sure would have looked great if this movie's any indication. Because the thing is, like, the other villain that Spawn readers really remember from those early runs is there's a villain named Billy Kincaid, who is this like child murderer ice cream man. And everyone remembers it because he's so disgusting and like so repellent of a villain. And that's the thing is, like, they went PG-13 on this. So I don't think you could do Billy Kincaid in the movies. And that's what I mean. That's why they made a big mistake right at the top, trying to like appeal to too broad of an audience with this.
Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm sorry to hear that you hated it that much, Chris. But the good news is, I know we just looked at a very divisive comic book film that you might not like, but hey, in our next episode we have a beloved comic book film to look at, one that everybody agrees is amazing, and that is actually going to lead us into our kind of next theme of episodes. Do you want to tell the listeners about that?
For sure. Failure to Franchise does February.
That's right.
Yeah, February. Starting with Fanforstic from 2015, the failed Fantastic Four reboot.
A classic.
I can't believe you've done this to me. I can't believe you've done this to me. And after Fantastic Four, we are doing I Am Number 4 from 2011. This is our first foray into the YA novel shit.
I know. We got to peel off this Band-Aid sooner or later.
Yeah.
The first of many.
And that's stop saying that. That's the most upsetting part about that, is that this is number 1 of about 732.
Like, our list of films to cover on this podcast is like roughly 70% teen YA adaptations.
Yeah. So anyway, Failure to Franchise does February.
Now, but to be fair,
sure. To be February fair. Sorry.
Well, I was gonna say, to be fair, we might not even get to that episode because who knows? Josh Trank might have us murdered after the Fantastic Four episode. Because I'd say odds are high that he will listen to the episode and engage with us meanly on social media. So
that's the only reason we're actually doing that episode. We need to get a rise out of that guy. Anyway, that's what's coming up in the very not too distant future. Follow us on Twitter at F2FPod. That's at F2, the number 2, FPod on Twitter and Instagram, and honestly all the socials on our letterbox to look at the link in your email, or not your email. Oh my god, your podcast app.
I'm not going to spend the time emailing every listener.
Oh man, we have so many.
It's even still like individual emails to everybody.
I know. All personalized. Anyway, like us there, like us everywhere. Rate, review, whatever you do. That'd be cool if you did that. And also, how about you join the tribe and hit that subscribe? That'd be great. And continue listening to our endeavor into garbage.
Chris, this is the part of the show where I like to zoom in at the last minute and say, like, hey, I forgot something from my notes.
Yes.
And I think I would be remiss. 2 things here. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the scene where Spawn is trying to evade cops on a ledge of a building, uses his cape to camouflage himself as bricks, it works, and then immediately after, he trips and falls off the ledge and immediately draws their attention again. Thought that was a great scene. And let's just end it with the classic line from the film, which I can't believe we didn't mention. The one that everybody was hoping to see in a Spawn film. When your hero says to the villain, "Get away from me, you fudge-packing midget."
Thanks for listening.
See ya.